So hi everyone, welcome to Architecture in the Den. So this is a podcast, YouTube, whatever format it is, talking about the business of architecture. And today we've got Stephen talking about the pandemic architecture opportunities. So Stephen, or Steve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hi there, Lisa. So I'm Stephen Drew. I am founder of the Architecture Social. I work at McDonald Company. I lead the architectural recruitment team. I've done architectural recruitment for 7 years. Before that, I worked in the industry for 3 years as a Part 2 architectural assistant. I studied Part 1 and Part 2 as well. So I've kind of been in a similar position, not quite like a director of a company or so forth at that time. But over the years, in terms of architectural recruitment, I've worked with a lot of companies. We're talking about companies like Frazardi to Grimshaw, to smaller architectural practices as well, of 20 to 30 people in size, and kind of helping them find people at different periods of time. And one of the things, like everyone here, I also went through the pandemic where there was a lot of change. And that's actually where the Architecture Social, which is a community of right now about 3,500 architects, but that was born during the pandemic when I was struggling to think what to do. I was on furlough and I wanted to do something good. So that's why I'm really happy to talk about taking a bit of a tricky situation like the pandemic and making it into an opportunity wherever you are, really.
Awesome.
In what profession.
So what is the Architecture Social?
Okay, cool. So the Architecture Social, originally, it started from the idea of, I can imagine Part 1 and Part 2 as being super stressed out at the moment, or thinking, how are they going to find a job in the architectural job market? Because, you know, they just graduated and it's a pandemic. So originally it started as that. And over time, it's basically an online platform, a community where people can share information, chat, log online, post events, attend events, do all this kind of cool stuff. And from that, over time, we do CV reviews. We've helped people have jobs. And if there's any architectural practices here and employers, you can post your vacancy on there to graduates and get applications. So hopefully it's just a fun, exciting space for people to explore, which was created last year during the pandemic.
Awesome. So I think you're putting up a page for Pride Road on there, the franchise.
Yeah. Well, we've got to support architectural practices like you, Lisa. That's the point, right? It's absolutely.
Hands. That's brilliant. So how has the architecture market been affected by the pandemic?
Really good question. So, I mean, February, March last year, it just was like it was like the economic crash of 2009. Basically, everything just dried up. Temporary contractors or anyone that were freelancing, I think a lot of contracts were pulled. Placements which were going through. So placements is the term in terms of architectural recruitment. People that were going for jobs, sometimes their jobs were cancelled because they were no longer there. And lots of people, as we know, lost jobs. I was on furlough. So it really, really took a downward spiral quite quickly. And like a knee-jerk reaction, it was just like projects on hold. We don't know what's going on. And unfortunately, a lot of people lost their jobs. It's since been a lot better than that, Lisa. It's quite active right now. So in terms of recruitment, because I've gone back to work, we're actually quite busy. And probably in terms of a very literal example of opportunities during the pandemic, there's a few sectors that are quite buoyant right now in terms of architecture. So large-scale housing and residential is quite strong. For instance, Lisa, as well, you've got some private work and residential. I hear Pride Road's doing really well. The other ones, the other sectors probably worth mentioning for the audience is healthcare because of the pandemic, and modular and data centers. So these are really growth sectors, whereas stuff like commercial really kind of plateaued. But now, even in commercial, we're seeing companies starting to look at how we're going to carve up existing offices. So again, making an opportunity about the existing floor plans. So those are some real examples. And just to answer your question again, summarize, it's a lot better on the architectural market right now. There are opportunities there to be had that weren't there before.
So how would you say any sectors have collapsed?
I wouldn't say collapse, but some are a lot slower than others. So education is one I never hear at the moment. That could be just my perspective on what I know of the market, but education is something I don't really see that much. Hospitality's got a lot slower. I mean, I've seen a few examples of hotels being converted into stay at like isolation booths for coronavirus. Other than that, I think some high-end residential is slower than large scale, and commercial offices were really struggling last year. Urban design and landscapes doing surprisingly well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's quite strong. I get a lot of requests for urban designers and landscape architects at the moment.
I mean, did you see the market sort of after 2009 and the follow-on from that? Are there any lessons that we can take from that?
Yeah, good question. I saw it as a part one. Okay, I was literally one of the lucky few that got a job. So that was when I was in industry, and that kind of like formed a few of the things that I'd like to talk about today. Whereas at the time, one of my approaches, everyone in the architectural studio was worried about not getting a job. And at the time, I had a friend, his name's Will McDaniel. Now he's a big YouTuber. It's just a bit of a strange coincidence. Go, put him into YouTube. That's another example of he was an architect and now he's built a YouTube channel. So there's lots of opportunities that you can do from the career. But going back to it, I sent my application to 1,000 architectural practices. Now I know, yeah,
wow.
1,000. Now I know, Lisa, that's not like, as an employee, you'd love to hear that someone wrote a beautiful custom email to Pride Road and with, with the CV and portfolio. But at the time, I had to take a gamble and I'm going to do the companies I love. And then I had to apply to the most amount of places. So I used probability as a way to make opportunity during a global no, it wasn't pandemic then. It was an economic crisis. And, actually the pandemic right now has caused a massive recession. And so the point was, because of that situation, I completely changed my approach. I no longer applied to 20 places, which I thought was the quote unquote best way to do it. I applied to the most amount of places. And from that, I actually ended up going for a job at EPR Architects, which was an architectural practice, which is now an AJ 100 practice. They were big, but they were never huge in the press. So I never would have founded them before, but it's because I behaved in a different way during that tough time that I actually got a job that I was really happy with.
They do say sort of, what is it? Comes out of necessity. Invention comes out of necessity.
Yeah, well,
I mean, yeah, it's like me after the crash of 2009. When I was looking for a job, there wasn't anything available, so I ended up being forced to set up on my own, and then sort of that was 2010, and then I went into franchising it.
There you go.
Which is very unusual. Was it you who I mentioned franchising to, and you said you had an example of a friend who'd done really well in franchising? Yeah,
so but he's not as glad. So if I was an architect and I was looking at franchise, I'd probably encourage to go the Pride Road, which is what you're doing. So he was on about secondhand video games at a franchise that a lot of people know called the Computer Exchange, which is CEX. So it's that website, it's that store that you think, oh my gosh, inside it's going to be disgusting and all this stuff, and you kind of go in there looking over the 50p's, but he made like £1 million. So I felt like the guy being like, really, you're doing a franchise of that? And then actually he was amazingly he's got a great life. And so I think franchising, let's talk about that for a second, because I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, because to me, an architecture practice, Pride Row was the first example I had as a franchise. I mean, I know so many people that have done it alone, but I guess like with the architectural social, what I like is the community aspect. But I suppose during the franchise, I'm sure you've learned a lot of mistakes that you can then pass on to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Because Laura was started up the franchise as well during the pandemic, effectively.
Yes, she did, down in New Forest and Bournemouth. She set up in January of last year with a face-to-face business, and 2 months later we went straight into the pandemic, and we had to completely pivot the whole model. But it was on me to change everything and find new ways of working. And because we had the systems in place, it was very easy just to sort of show everyone how to do it, and so they could learn really quickly from sort of how to pivot. And it's within the franchise, you've got that structure, you've got the branding, you've got the marketing, you've got the technical know-how, so you can just plug into it without losing your creativity. I think a lot of people think of franchising and think you have to do, you know, exactly the same thing. It's not. You get to be an architect, do what you love doing. It's just that you've got that umbrella structure to follow.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good example of looking at it another way. And I do think that while there are opportunities out there, I think it's especially during the pandemic. I mean, the whole thing about setting up the architectural social community is that it's nice to have a bit of that purpose. And I think because there are people on there, it was nice to have a responsibility during a time when, you know, I could have quite easily drifted along and gone on Netflix and drunk copious amounts of wine. And yeah, it would have been fun for a while, but then your brain starts to melt. And that's the other thing I was going to say, is that anyone that's doing, especially if you're thinking about things you can do, even now, I think this is like a really great example of a time when everyone's at home. We know everyone's at home. So you can be quite smart with the concept of the fact that everyone's at home. How can you make a difference? You can actually mentor people on Zoom calls. That's one of the immediate things I would do. If you want to like preoccupy your time and be constructive, like actually teach people is probably a really good thing to do. And you can, I'm sure there's lots of part ones and part two students that would really value, you know, your input. Or the other thing, like getting into your artwork or doing something that's creative is going to be really helpful. And I guess as well, Lisa, because we were talking about earlier, there's not a better time to do networking. Now, I hate the term networking because it can sound a bit cliche, but what I'm actually talking about is meeting people. Like me and you, Lisa, we hadn't met each other until like 2 months ago, but you meet online, you talk about things. I was interested in the franchise. You were talking about the community aspects of the architecture social. And then from there, we were having a giggle on Clubhouse this morning. And here we are doing an event, and that all comes from talking and being out there and being active and going to events.
Yeah, I think I found you on LinkedIn. Well, it's easy to contact people because everyone has their contact details up in the internet. If there's someone you want to talk to, approach them. I think whether it's through LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, you know, send a direct message. Most of the like 9 times out of 10, you'll get a response. And I think that's exactly how I contacted you, Stephen, just thinking, he's very interesting. What makes him tick? Do you think he'll come on podcast? And sure enough, you ask and you have a chat, and then we're doing stuff together, which is awesome.
Wow, this is it. And I think even touching upon Clubhouse right now, because that's an interesting one that's popped up, but I think it's a really good example on even at first, initially, do you remember? Because you said to me, Lisa, you should check it out. And I was like, I'm not sure. And I haven't got an Apple. And actually, again, it's like a reminder of, so a few more people said they were on it. And I thought, right, I have to remind myself not to be stubborn. Yeah. I've got to do something.
You've got to open yourself up to
and go out of my comfort zone, like find an old Apple, which is a literal example, but then loading it up and thinking, oh, here we go, another app. And then when you get on there, it's like, okay, this is interesting because there's real conversation there.
Yeah.
And from that, you learn stuff. I'm not saying you have to be on it all night, but maybe a little bit of Clubhouse or a little bit of something else. It's interesting because all of these things are tools for communication.
So there'll be a lot of people out there who don't know what Clubhouse is. So what is Clubhouse?
Wow, I've only been on it since Friday. I'll do my best to summarize it. So It's a new social media platform. It's definitely on trend. So whether or not it will be used in a year or so, who knows? But that doesn't matter, because the point is it's here and now. And these aren't recorded things online like podcasts, which are there forever and a day. What I find interesting about Clubhouse is that this conversation's in the moment. So we were chatting this morning. There was no recording. There was, if you weren't there, you weren't there. And I kind of like it. It has a little bit of the old school aspect of being at an event and meeting someone and having a physical connection, or like something in the moment. And I think it has that. And
it's just an audio drop in. So there's no visuals, there's no backgrounds, or what showing artwork. It's literally people talking. And I think that's what's so exciting about it. And for me, I think it's about connections. So it's about just trying to find your tribe. What are you interested in? If you go on at certain times, you might get people from America, different parts of America. But if you go on in the morning, you tend to find Brits and Europeans in there. And I've set up a room called Constructive Together. So I'm running it 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. So if you're interested, download the Clubhouse app and join, and then follow me. So if you follow me, or you can follow Steve, and then you can see what events that we're putting on. If you don't follow us, you're not going to find out. And then you'll get notifications when the events come out. And then you literally drop in at 8 o'clock in the morning. And this morning, the Constructive Together is about construction networking. So it's about just pulling together a community of construction professionals. So whether they're architects, students, interior designers, quantity surveyors, builders from all over the country, it's an opportunity to have a chat, make connections. And I think there were some really good ones that came out this morning. I'm really pleased.
Yeah, I think what I quite like about the people at the moment on Clubhouse, and with anything in life, we're talking about going a bit out of your comfort zone and having a chat with people. Now, that can seem intimidating. However, if you find, in terms of your networking, if it comes from a place of passion, it's always going to be easy. So with going on Clubhouse, I find it easier now because I talk about the architecture social. I enjoy aspects of it. I enjoy building that community, and I want to get people involved. So part of it, you go and you say what you're up to and your passion. And a bit like what I'm saying earlier about finding it's an opportunity right now that you're happy with. If you kind of get sucked into your painting as you're an architect, or you get that creative juices flowing, or you teach someone, or you mentor, or you have a project, or you'd like to enter a competition that you thought was cool and you're looking for more people to get involved, then if you suddenly go to the Clubhouse, or you go to the architecture social, or you go on LinkedIn with a kind of an angle or a passion, I'm sure a lot of people will resonate, and the opportunities will come from that. I think bringing these ideas and kind of being a little bit vulnerable and going out of your comfort zone, people pick up on it. And from that, collaborations will happen. I'm convinced of it because it happened for me. And the people that do this, that I see generally are quite busy and quite productive during this time. Yeah.
So have you got any advice for people who are job searching at the moment?
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is I've done quite a few of these on my YouTube, and you can go there. You can Google the architecture social, but the essence of what we're talking about is it goes back to a bit like what I was saying in 2009. You've got to be, if it's not working, you can't get hung up on before. You can't get hung up on I've done it wrong, or I'm not right, or any of that. You've got to get rid of these negative thoughts, and you've got to think of something constructive. And you've got to think, right, well, the situation's changed. I'm not getting anywhere, so I need to change my behavior. So the first thing I would recommend is looking at some of the things, comments. I've done a few on CV and portfolio. You can look at that. Ask people for feedback. But the bit that I really would like to press here is you need to think about how you're going to change your behavior. So exactly like we had a laugh at the start, Lisa, when I told you I sent my CV to 1,000 places. If you're looking for a job and you're not getting anywhere, you have nothing to lose right now by casting the net wider. And so my big bit of advice is to think about what you've been doing, analyze it in terms of, okay, this is not getting me results. I'm sending my CV to 20 places. I've got one interview and I've got no offers. What I would say is, if you think about it in a radical sense and you sent your CV to 1,000 places, then I can tell you factually in 2009, I got 5 interviews from it and 1 job offer. So just change your approach on things, whether that's a job seeking or whether you're in the industry right now. Yeah.
Great advice. And we have franchises available around the country as well. So if you're an architect.
Well, that's a good example, isn't it, of changing, or if you kind of feel like it's not working. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because if you're kind of frustrated and you're feeling like you're not in the right place and you want to look at doing something a bit differently, but with an infrastructure there, that's kind of like a good middle ground, isn't it? You don't need to literally find the accountants and make all the mistakes that other people have. You learn from basically your lessons and you kind of get the best of both worlds. So, but I wouldn't be the best person, Lisa, because I haven't practiced architecture for many years.
You need to be a qualified architect as well.
Yeah, I'm a part 2.
UK architect. Yes, that's our benchmark. So, you know, that's our baseline. You need to be ARB registered.
Maybe one day, if I go back to architecture, I'll let you know.
When you've given up on architecture social. No, when everyone's in a job.
Do you reckon? Yeah, maybe. That'd be a good goal.
Yeah. So what are you doing to keep yourself sane at the moment?
So the social takes up a lot of my time, but I'm far from perfect. I mean, look, I mean, I gained like at least a good stone since like, you know, the pandemic. And so at the moment I need to get myself in the gym and do all this stuff. And no one's ever perfect. I'm far from perfect. The architecture social kind of fulfilled that social aspect as well. It keeps me busy and I'm enjoying that, but I still have more to go. So my next thing is, I've got to like knuckle down and be hungry all the time, and I'm sure that will help. That's my next goal. So, and you'll be able to see, won't you? You'll be able to judge me because I'm on Zoom all the time these days.
That's true. No, you look great.
Oh, thank you.
So, what about upskilling whilst if you're between jobs?
Perfect time. I mean, the amount of times, and you got to, again, I think the key word anyone here is accountability. And I want everyone to really review themselves and think like, what have they always asked to do? Whether it's like, oh, I really should pick up my artwork, or I really should pick up my guitar, or I really should dust off the CV. This is the perfect time to do it now. And everyone has a view, right? Whether we're going to be returning to work in a month or 2, where it's going to take a whole year. You can't let that get in the way. So when it's saying upskilling, I want you to think about that thing in the back of your brain, which everyone's got one that you've been putting off. And like a really good example is like Revit or something, a piece of software that you've been putting off. And again, it goes back to the point of everyone has a debate. And I'm sure, Lisa, you feel it, does it apply to your practice? Does this and that? And everyone will have an opinion of it. But if you're looking for a job right now, the reality is if you're aiming for a large to medium practice, knowing Revit is going to make a massive difference to you getting the job. So rather than saying, well, is BIM relevant or not a lot of places use it, or so not everyone uses it, forget all that, because that's kind of making noise and excuses, and just say, I'm going to learn it. I'm going to do it now. And the other bit of advice that I think is good is that a lot of architects I know sometimes, I mean, I'm a little bit more of an extrovert, but I mean, the beauty of a lot of architects is introverts, problem solvers, amazing people, great team members. But what I need you to do is think that actually, you know, being introverted or kind of being in your comfort zone or overthinking things and then not doing it is not going to be helpful. I think you've got to go out there and start doing it, and don't be too self-critical. It's like anything else. The first time you do something, it's not going to be amazing, or it's going to be difficult at first learning Revit. Or, I mean, again, the architectural social, there are so many mistakes I made, hundreds. And the stuff that I've learned has come from trial and error. But if I kind of stopped at the start, I would never have learned them. So that would be my advice, is just to kind of don't be too self-critical. Don't worry what everyone else is thinking, because I can guarantee you, think about it, most people are in their own worlds anyways. You be you. If you want to do a YouTube channel, then you should do it. Don't get embarrassed. Don't let yourself talk yourself out of it. Just do it now.
I mean, that's interesting, because I've had, you know, sort of a lot of our architects are notoriously overthinkers.
Yeah, of course.
And I think sort of joint reasons to join the franchise might be just make a phone call to me or Rachel, have a chat with us. And it's usually that first step that's the most daunting. I mean, I remember when both Laura and Magda came to found me on various social networking platforms and said, you're a mum architect, how do you do it? I want to see how you do, I want to work with you. And that was amazing. You know, they saw, and it was just that first email going, hello, I want to talk to you. And then all of a sudden it just opens up that big world of, you know, taking your future in a new direction. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think to add to that, stuff from the architecture social, I could never have predicted it happened because of the journey. I mean, being on BBC Radio London was pretty insane. No, it was pretty, yeah. I mean, I was really nervous doing it, which sounds mad because I do a live stream, but I was so nervous. But now I've done it, I'm like, great. It's something I never thought I would do. And like, that meant a lot, because while my parents are really supportive, BBC Radio is something very familiar, you know, so it was quite a nice experience. But that really would not have come if I just did nothing during furlough. But at the same time, if you haven't done anything, don't worry about that, because I wasted a month and put on like half a stone. But the difference was, it was kind of just going like, that can't continue. I need to mix it up. And I think it's all about not beating up, because I mean, I used to do that a lot in the past as well. You know, all the could have beens, I should have this, I should have that. It's too late now. It's never too late. You just got to start now. And that's going to be the big difference between the person that starts tomorrow after this, or like right now, anyone after listening to this, wherever you're at, if you do something on the back of it, I respect that. And if you message me, no matter how small it is, and you tell me you do something, that's what I get my kicks off. So for anyone listening, let's get the camera out. Let me get my bat. So anyone that's looking, wake up and let me know, and I will respect you so much for it. And I promise you, I will reply to that, because that kind of attitude, I think, is like an attitude that will get you really far in life. Just mixing it up.
I love your energy.
Yeah. Ooh.
And you were like this at 8 o'clock this morning as well. Well, that was a
bit tougher, but I was excited, but I needed like 2 coffees, you know what I'm saying?
So we've come to an end. Like all good things, it has to come to an end. So thanks everyone for listening. So this is Architecture in the Den with me, Lisa Raynes, and Architecture Social's Stephen Drew. We will be recording another podcast this time next week at 7 o'clock. And so please find us on Spotify, on YouTube channel, or just Google Pride Road Franchise, and you should be able to find my details. And if you've got an iPhone, download Clubhouse, join and come and follow me. I'm Lisa Raynes there, and Stephen Drew's on there as well. Follow us both and come and talk to us in a room. So
amazing.
Thanks, Stephen.
My pleasure. Take care.